Hello, my name's Joga Conga and this is another video for elttraining.com. This video is a little bit different because it's not aimed at trainees, it's aimed at trainers and it comes from the talk I did at ITEFL recently. So I hope that you'll enjoy it. Let's move on. I aim to do this talk because I'm a CELTA assessor and so I get to see quite a few different CELTA centres and assignments. And whilst most of them are usually pretty standard, sometimes you see one or two that are a little bit different, and I thought that it would be nice to share those around a bit. I'm not advocating these as better than anything else, I'm just raising awareness because they're a bit different and I think sometimes it's nice to have alternatives up your sleeve. So maybe you want to start by thinking a little bit about this. Who wrote your centre's assignments and are you happy with them? Do you ever use different ones? It might be an interesting point to start by thinking about. The plan for this talk is to look at an alternative for Focus on the Learner, one for the language skills related task and one's for the lessons from the classroom. I'm not going to look at the language related task because in my experience this one is quite different between centres often. So let's start with Focus on the Learner. The usual then is of course that the focus is on one learner and that you interview them outside of class. The alternative that I've seen in one or two centres is that the whole class is used for the observation. Now, you might be surprised at this, but it's completely within the Cambridge specifications, as you can see here. The centre that I first saw this in split their first teaching practice into two halves. The first hour, the tutor teaches and the trainees watch, normal. But then in the second hour, the trainer leaves the class and leaves the trainees to interview the class, talk to them in groups in a sort of a carousel formation so they have an opportunity to listen to them and to make notes and to record them and maybe to get some writing from them. They then continue to observe the learners during the teaching practice when their peers are teaching or when they're teaching to inform the rest of the assignment. So possible advantages I think to this are that it's probably a more realistic task to assess a whole group rather than one person in particular, and that perhaps it also gives them more motivation to really listen to the learners and to observe their peers during the teaching practice when they're not teaching. So I think that's possibly a real advantage to this. It also potentially gives the trainees a real motivation to talk about the class needs as a group, and I think that's probably helpful too. Possible problems, arguably it's easier to research if the class share an L1, so if you're doing this in an English speaking environment where the class are multilingual, it might be more difficult to assess why those mistakes are being made, possibly. And potentially all the trainees have the same data. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but it's perhaps something to be aware of. So what do you think? Would this work in your context? What does your centre's assignment look like for Focus on the Learner? If you'd like to see the written rubric for the one I've just described, it's just below this video. Please have a look. Let's move on. Language skills related task. So this one, of course, the usual thing is that authentic material is used, and I've seen this in almost every centre I've been to except for one, and they're using classroom material, coursebook material. When I first saw this, I was a bit concerned that it didn't follow Cambridge's guidelines, but it does. So the centre used this for consolidation of the receptive skills input early in the course, in week 1 of a 4-week course, rather than in week 3 probably of a 4-week course when the authentic material is introduced. This doesn't mean that the course doesn't introduce authentic material, it's just that the language skills related task, the assessment, relates to receptive skills for course book material. I can see some possible advantages here. I think that it gives a focus on the receptive skills early in the course and allows for consolidation of that, as I said. I think it avoids the language grading issue, particularly if you're with the pre-intermediate group or a lower level group and you're trying to find authentic material that would fit them. This can be a problem. And it also avoids the issue of having to find an appropriate authentic text, which can take a lot of time for trainees. Possible problems: more course book bound. Perhaps it discourages the use of authentic material, but these I have question marks because I don't think the two are necessarily incompatible. You can certainly still encourage the use of authentic material without having an assignment about it. So again, what do you think about this? Would it work in your context? And maybe you'd like to talk to other trainers in your centre about the assignments that you do and whether you like them. Moving on to my third offering then, I have an alternative for lessons from the classroom. And the usual assignment here, of course, is that it's in one part at the end of the course. But the alternative that I saw was in two parts. One shorter part at the beginning of the course and one at the end. So at the beginning of the course, the trainees were asked to write a list of qualities that they thought were important in a teacher. And then at the end, they were asked to reflect on this list, see if they still felt the same way, and to reflect on how they felt they developed in relation to the list that they'd written. There's some possible advantages to this. The first task is almost impossible to fail. Clearly it's shorter. Clearly they have to pass the second part in order to pass the whole, but it does help to build confidence early in the course. They've done one part of an assignment and they passed it, so that can be helpful. It also gives them a focus early on, so it makes them think about what good teaching is about, and that's potentially useful. Possible problems: again, I've got a question mark with this. Maybe it funnels the reflection too early on, but it doesn't disclude anything else. When they come to write their second part, they may want to write about something that they didn't include in their initial list, and that might also be interesting. So I don't think there's a particular problem there. So again, would this work in your context? Maybe you'd like to try it out. The rubric again is below this video if you want to have a look at it. I hope that's been helpful, and good luck with trying out these or any other alternatives to your assignments. Feel free to email me if you've got any other suggestions. I'm very happy to put them out on the website. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Bye bye.